here tonight. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here.
Alicia's was it, and then
I know we're going to do that one more time, so I'm going to let you gather your energy. But, you know, it is, I think for a lot of people, the reason why even just getting this room in order is difficult is because this is so much of a family affair. There are people who, you know, have been a part of this movement and this work around the reduction of violence inside of Atlanta and around the country for so long. And, you know, there's many of you have been a part of events all day long. You've been going, doing meetings, you've been shaking hands, kissing babies, doing all that, making sure like you can get that money, give that money, whatever you need to do. But what I think is so special about this room and about tonight is that the people who are in this audience is just such a uniquely curated group of people. We did not promote this far and wide. We just said we want the people who we know need to be having this conversation, who are a part of this conversation, and who are going to be a part of this conversation even after this conversation is over, that they have to be in the room. So I want to give it up for a community celebration and give it up for y'all for being a part of this community. Excellent. So for those of you who I don't have the pleasure to know, my name is Rohit Malhotra. I'm a team member here at the Center for Civic Innovation. There is an amazing group of people who have been working day and night to make sure that this event is as successful as possible. So if you are a team member, can I hear you say woo real quick? Woo. Great, can we give it up for the team here real quick?
I woo for you.
Excellent. We're so grateful for the team here. For those of you that this is your first time at the Center for Civic Innovation or engaging with us, CCI is an organization that is very stubbornly committed to policy change in the city of Atlanta. And policy change seems like it is one of those foreign concepts, or we're only allowed to talk about that if you got a suit and tie on. But we believe that policy change is actually only real when it is people-driven. And that policy change happens when we tell the truth about what's actually going on, when we bring people together to have a more robust and honest conversation about what is happening, but how did we get here? Because what you see today is usually a reflection of things that have happened well before today, and will give us some good fortune on what will happen later. And the third thing for us is that policy change happens when we can help the public reimagine what public policy could and should look like. And over the course of the past 18 months, thanks to the leadership of JQ, who you will hear from in just a second as well, we have partnered with a number of folks in this city to say that the folks who understand why violence exists in the first place, but also how we do something about it, they're already in communities and neighborhoods doing that work. It just isn't being valued by the people who make decisions all the time. And that if we actually valued the work that they were doing, not only would we solve this problem, but we could actually reimagine what something like public safety even looks like. For some of us, we take the luxury and the privilege of knowing that we can define that by our terms. For a lot of people, that public safety is defined for them. And so what we are trying to do is to make sure that the people who are most affected by the decisions that we make are actually a part of the solution building. And so I'm so proud to say that over the course of the past year, we've been able to support some of the most brilliant, beautiful, just kind and committed people who are dedicated their entire life to reducing gun violence in this city. And they are not doing it because this is a job that they want. They're doing it because that is the only choice. And we should be so lucky that this is how they choose to show up and respond to being directly affected by these issues and having to see it every day, that they choose to deal with that through service. So if you are one of the fellows at CCI that is working on some of these issues, can you please stand so we can acknowledge and recognize you for your service and your work? So, stay standing for me, because it's not enough to just have them stand. You need to hear and say their names, because we have to give them their flowers while we can. it is extremely important. Takesia Shields is fighting every single day to make sure that mothers have every tool that they need if their children are in our system, that they get out and they stay out, but also that mothers and families are empowered with the tools that they need to be able to support and advocate for their children and their families. So thank you for the work that you do, Takesia. Dominique is a part of our newest cohort with pedal pushers. Like he says, I just get black folks on bikes and make them feel, and he is doing that by making sure that people feel not only joyful, but that young kids feel safe. That violence isn't just about, the risk of violence isn't just the fact that young people may end up being involved in it themselves. The other risk of violence that he has so eloquently taught me is that we may lose some of these kids to isolation, that they may lock themselves up and say, I don't even want to be a part of the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so he's fighting every day to make sure that that is no longer a reality for those kids. So thank you, pedal pushers. And then we have Chi and Leonard, who I can't believe their agents allow them to be here. They are not only local celebrities, they are national celebrities. I don't rock with the administration on everything, but the fact that the White House chose to acknowledge these two individuals is important, not because of any political reason, but because it was finally an acknowledgement of the fact that the real work is happening on the ground. And I will tell you, one of the things that is important as the context of this conversation is that these two folks showed up as one of the people representing a city where city leadership was not standing behind them doing it. And so they are the city leaders. They are the people who we need to be following. And Hope Hustlers is interrupting and reducing violence and preventing violence in our neighborhoods. They have some corners that have reduced violence by multiple percentage points, and so thank you for the exemplary work that y'all do. Thank you. And I'm not gonna let Abby get away with me not seeing her. I knew she tried me real quick, but I will tell you, and this is the truth. Before I even met any of the folks that I just mentioned, Abby Adune Henderson has been talking about what is happening to what she says, our babies inside of neighborhoods and communities well before we had the language in Atlanta to talk about it. Now everybody's got words to say it. She's been saying this before we fully understood what it is that she was fighting for. And so Abby started Gangsters to Growers and the Come Up Project to make sure that young kids in the neighborhood are treated and valued with the entrepreneurial spirit that is so natural already within them. And she's just making sure that we actually show these kids respect, but also show them a pathway to economic mobility. And she's been doing this work since well before we existed as an organization, but certainly is someone that we should be very, very proud of. So thank you, Abby. I don't get tired of this part, so I'm gonna keep going because it is important. And because it is important because we forget that tonight we're gonna hear a lot about the things that are going wrong, but I'm gonna start with all the things that are going right. And when we think about the things that are going right, it starts with this man right here, mayor of Mechanicsville, mayor of Atlanta, right? If I could vote for him, I would. I might write him in next year, but look, Dip is so committed to making sure that young kids in his neighborhood are not picking up guns to solve conflict. And you will see him, he might get a phone call in the middle of this event, and he will be out the door making sure that kids are all right. And this is the example of what the work actually looks like, that the work starts with people who dedicate their life to making sure that these kids are just going to be okay by any means necessary. So thank you, Dip, for showing us what that looks like and what that means. And then, Charmaine Brown, we met in the beginning of COVID years, and she has been doing this work in the honor of her son, who was unnecessarily killed in a fight that he wasn't even a part of. And Jared, her son, his story has been a part of her fight. But I will tell you, she has showed me, again, how lucky we are that mothers who lose their children choose to fight in this way. We should be so lucky that that's the choice that you made. You have every reason to burn this thing down, and you still choose to build it up. And that is the most beautiful form of service that I could think of, and the work speaks for itself. So thank you for the work that you do with Jared's Heart of Success. Last but certainly not least, Derek and Dawn Townsend are not only an example of like what love really feels like and looks like in a room. They are a beautiful unit that have been working to make sure that kids inside of our school systems aren't treated differently because of what they're going through outside of that school system. They provide, I mean, don't let their swag fool you, right? Please do not let their swag fool you. These folks are degreed. These folks have been doing the work. They could be doing almost anything they wanted to in the world, and their two children have seen their journey of this work and are here with us in every event, including this one. But through their work with Hopeful Change, they are making sure that our school systems have the tools that they need to address what these kids are going through Dawn's background in counseling and in DT's background in mentorship. Together, they actually make sure that it's culturally relevant for folks to address these things head on. So that's all happening in Atlanta. So as we talk today, yes, Atlanta has its challenges. Atlanta has its critiques, and you will hear those today. But as you hear them, I'm going to start this conversation the same way that I want to end it, which is with hope and gratitude. So thank you to these groups of people for being here. Excellent. I am now going to get us to jump right into the conversation that many of you are here tonight to be a part of and to hear about. So if I could have our esteemed panelists join me up on stage, we'll give them a round of applause, and we will jump right in. As we're doing that, if you want to follow along online, if you want to send some messages, or if you want to call your kids to tell them to tweet for you, you can go ahead and follow us on Civic Atlanta and all of those things. And I also wanted to just give one more shout out, which was to the Annie Casey Foundation, particularly to Amanda, who has been a champion for us in this work. You know, I literally just said this a few moments ago. I don't rock with all funders, and I don't consider Amanda a funder. I consider her a partner in this work because even just yesterday when we met, we're constantly thinking about how we change people's mindsets around this work so that this doesn't have to ever exist again. I hope we never have to have these types of conversations again. And so I'm grateful to you, Amanda, for your leadership in that. Yes, and Tamika is here as well. Tamika, if we could give it up for Tamika. Tamika, I just consider you local now because how much Atlanta sees you. So shame on me. But no, Tamika is in Baltimore, has been advocating for Atlanta around the country. And that is exactly what we need, is more people telling these stories. And thank you to Tamika, who has been doing that. Beautiful. You have cards where you can put Q&A if you need to put some questions on there. Questions end with question marks, so, you know. All right. Okay. Without further ado, I'm going to have our esteemed panel be able to have what I hope is a more robust conversation, where this is an unscripted conversation. This is not something we're going to give you boring questions that they already have rehearsed answers to, but we're going to get some of the most brilliant minds who are thinking about community-based violence reduction to have an honest conversation about where we're at, what's happening, and where we need to go. I'm gonna have each of y'all introduce yourselves because I couldn't possibly do your backgrounds justice. And y'all's bios are too long too. Instead of talking about your accolades, I'll let folks Google you because I know they can. I would love to say where your drive for service comes from. Like, why? Why are you doing this? Where is this coming from for you? And of course, I would love to start with you, JQ.
So, hi everyone. My name is Jaquel Clemens Moore. I'm the director of the IVY Project. IVY is Interrupting Violence in Youth and Young Adults. We're a hospital-based violence intervention program that's at Grady Hospital. Is my mic on?
Yep.
And I guess like what brings me to this work, Rohit, is just I'm a servant. I'm a servant and service, and growing up with a grandmother who really emphasized the importance of taking care of other people and collective care. And so that's what brings me to this, you know. In addition to like being directly impacted by gun violence, losing friends at a very young age, losing my nephew to gun violence, really helped to kind of center me in this work. And so because of that, I show up in a personal capacity to kind of like move things along. And that's why I'm here. You know, like I'm deeply committed to the wonderful people that I had an opportunity to meet when I was the former director of the mayor's office, and in that position, I met so many people who also kind of held that sense of service and that sense of urgency for community, and it just made me be deeply committed to like rooting myself here and working with people here to make sure that like we move the dial on this thing. So that's what
JQ is also a huge Falcons fan.
Stop it. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Huge.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. Go Saints.
Very
Who
big.
that?
Hold on, wait.
Who that?
No, we love
asking a
her.
question,
She's so
no one knows the
disrespectful,
answer.
Jesus.
No one is
She's so
sure who
disrespectful.
that is. So yes, absolutely. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Anthony, how about you? Tell us a little bit about where service comes from.
Yeah, Anthony Smith, executive director with City United. I'm gonna have to leave early because I got an 8:15 flight that started boarding at 8:15. But service, almost like JQ, this is purpose-driven work, right? I thought I was gonna be an attorney. Was set up to go to law school and all this stuff like that. But found myself doing youth work, working with young people, and understanding that young people needed as many opportunities as possible to succeed, right? I'm a high school dropout. Didn't have folks who supported me in the way that I needed them to, had a good family, but folks outside of that, right? So I wanted to create spaces, especially for young black men and boys to succeed and make sure that they get the first, second, third, and fourth opportunity to find their purpose. So open up to that, and again, purpose allows you to step into many spaces that you didn't even know was there. I didn't know there was a damn City United, right? I didn't know there was a mayor's office of violence prevention, right? Because all of that stuff was not there when I started in this work, right? But you set yourself up when you open up for your purpose. And purpose is always about service, right? So people always are saying you do too much. I don't think I do enough, right? Because I think there's always more to do. And I think when we do this work, the folks who I roll with, you know, you can call them any time of the day. They're thinking about this work. They're on vacation. They're thinking about this work. They're in different countries. They're thinking about this work because we just want to get it right. Because we know that this country and our cities can be better, and we work every day to get there, right? So that's why I do this, right? This is purpose-driven. This is for the other little Anthonys that did not have a space and did not make it, right? Because I think if I can sit in this seat and I can run this national organization, anybody can do this. Right, I'm nobody special. I just had opportunities that kept presenting themselves, and a lot of our young people don't even get to that place. Right, their lives are taken away before that, or they feel like their lives are taken away, and they figure they do other things that block them and stuff like that. So how do we continue to open up space for our young people to thrive and find their purpose while I do this?
Love that. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
How about for you? Why public service? If you could introduce yourself and why public service? Where does that come from?
Hi, y'all. I'm Fatima Lorraine Dreyer. I'm Executive Director of the Health Alliance for Violence Intervention. So appreciate the question and appreciate the space. It feels good here, y'all. Thank you. It's hard to pinpoint because there's so many pieces, but what's calling me now is this work is an opportunity to channel our ancestors' wildest dreams about what we are capable of. You know, I come from a community, my family's from Alabama, I grew up in New Jersey, and you know, violence was a part of our community. We saw it every day. It wasn't who we were, right, but it showed up. And you know, talking about different ways in which our proximity to violence, you know, my father, my brothers were in that life and were convicted. Two of my brothers were convicted for murder, and I've been in and out of prison most of my life. My father's been in and out of prison most of my life. And that impact is significant, you know, for families. And I just keep thinking, or as I was growing up, thinking about what's the key that unlocks all of this for us. You know, I started my career actually in like community development work, so I was like, you know, all right, we got, you know, let's bring money and economic opportunity and the jobs, right? But it occurred to me very early on that without healing, right? There you go. We're not going to receive the whatever gifts might come, right? So we have to do it for ourselves, and they come from outside. That's right. And so that set me on a totally different trajectory. So I have a degree in, you know, psychology. I've done a lot of work on trauma and healing. And now we work thinking about the health approach to violence, right? And we're seeing the hospital-based violence intervention work, but not that hospitals own healthcare. We co-create healthcare, but that healing and what it means to scale healing in community, it takes infrastructure. And I think that's what we're trying to build here. So it's an honor, frankly. It's a privilege that I get to wake up every day and serve my people in this way. Because I think I truly believe we have the key that unlocks it all. So we're grateful for you. Thank you.
Why do you do this work? What drives you to do service?
Yes, Akila Sherrell's Executive Director of the Community-Based Public Safety Collective. I grew up in the culture, you know, in the gang culture. You know, I'm a project baby, grew up in the Jordan Housing Projects in Watts. Witnessed things that no child should be subject to, right? Participated in the gang war that in LA County during our time between the 80s and 2000s claimed like, you know, 20, 30,000 lives. And that didn't include those who were permanently maimed or locked up for the rest of their life, you know? Lost a lot of friends and family members to the war in the streets. Including, you know, 16 years in the trenches on the front line to stop the violence. Me and my brother them organized a peace treaty in the early 90s between the Crips and Bloods in LA, took it to a bunch of different cities across the country. But 16 years in the front line on the trenches, you know, raising 4 of my kids as a single father. My son goes to college, come home from a party. Goes to a party and is shot to death, you know, at a party, right? And so I'm no novice to violence. I've witnessed it all my life, you know, but nothing ever prepares you for the loss of your kid. And so to ensure that Terrell's death is not in vain, you know, I've committed my life, you know, to ensuring that we lift up a different narrative around, you know, when our children are killed in the streets. That it's not enough to convict a perpetrator, you know, to life in prison, you know, without asking the deeper questions, right? We don't condone what the perpetrator did, but we want to ask, like, what happened in the personal life of this individual that caused them to have, you know, this callous heart that they would take another human being's life, you know, because you don't kill somebody and you wake up and you skip and sing and dance. You see your victim's face in dreams and imaginings and flashbacks, right? So this kid's life is intrinsically connected to my son's for the rest of his. And him being able to reconcile what he did in his own heart, you know, will determine, you know, how he actually shows up in the world, you know? And so I'm not just committed to the good kids and stopping the killing because, you know, I tell you, like, when we organized the peace treaty, when we got to the place where, you know, it was like, what we doing, you know, the cats on the other side was like, bring your shooters in the room, you know? And if y'all really mean this, bring your shooters in the place, we're gonna bring our shooters and we're gonna have an agreement. And so, you know, even sometimes those who are perpetrating heinous acts in our neighborhood can play a role in our salvation. You know, so I believe that every human being is redeemable, you know, and there's something valuable given the opportunity. Because taking a life is an initiation. You know, it's a deep analysis and inquiry into the circumstances that brought you there, right? And so, I'm committed to this work because that it's transformative. I mean, you know, it's to make sure that you know, again, that Terrell's life is not in vain. I mean, his death is not in vain, and that I'm consistently transformed by the lives that we change through the collective work that we do.
Chief, how about for you? Why public service? Where does this come from for you?
I think like so many of us up here, and even as you was explaining it, trauma for me. I grew up in the streets. I was considered a problem child. I was a person that was doing a lot of the things that they speak about, people doing out in the streets and being out in the community causing and creating havoc. And so I saw a lot of trauma. The trauma is the big buzzword and stuff right now, but I saw a lot of that trauma. I caused a lot of that trauma, but it took for my youngest sibling, my baby brother, to be murdered, and me to see him dead, for me to really have an awakening and understand that if it was someone like myself there at the moment, that had that social capital in the community, because so many feel like it's men. And I can tell you myself, with it being me, it's a lot of women that are on the front line that do the same things and have that same type of pull in these communities. If someone such as myself would have been there that day, the what if. So it was easy. I saw my mom and everyone, and I realized that my mom wasn't the only one going through this trouble and the pain and the effect of him being murdered. It was the community as well. It was the schools and all of these things that we don't think about when these things happen. So my why ended up being my brother being murdered, and being a person that I am, being able to give back to someone, not taking my pain and making it passion, and giving back to my people what I felt like wasn't given to me. If someone would have been there in that moment and really stood in the gaps, then this incident might not have occurred. So it really ignited a purpose inside of me, not only in the community, because I've been doing this work for so long, as so many people have. Nonprofit wasn't on my mind. Even being in the hospital, and I know I didn't explain who, like my backup. My name is Chitari Alexander. For those that didn't catch it, I serve as a COO and co-founder of Hope Hustlers, which is a street gun violence intervention program. And I also have the astute honor of being a hospital violence intervention specialist with the Ivy Project at Grady. Like I said, I am a Grady baby, born and raised from Atlanta. I saw my brother die at Grady. So I was like, if I could ever come back and give that level of service and love I saw what Grady tried to do, if I could come back and stand in the gap in the streets and in the hospital and give the same type of attention, need, love, and care, and think about the root causes of these problems, not just victimize these people, because my brother was a teenager. The person that murdered him was a full-blown adult. So it's not just a teen that's affected, it's the adults and the young adults too, thinking about the problems and changing that anger and really getting to the root of why this happened. That's what brings me to this work every day. That's why I wake up every day and do what I do. Though we all grow weary, it gives me a sense of purpose, and I dedicated my life to it.
Anthony, I know you have to leave soon, and you probably have pre-check, but still. But you are in Atlanta, so the time in which you leave will decide your fate. But I have two pointed questions that I want to make sure we can hear from you on. The first, as I hear this, is I want to understand why it is, I mean, you see this work around the country. Why is it only Black people who are screaming crisis on this? Why do you feel that, I am not seeing rage around this issue, or even, I'm not seeing action on this issue outside of Black leadership.
No, I think because folks have been able to disconnect themselves from the communities and the people that this is happening in, right? So we go across the country and we talk to a lot of people about this work, and we come at it from a damn, you should just care because kids are dying. And we also know that we got to come at it because damn, you're going to save money if we do things the opposite way, right? So at the end of the day, I believe that the majority of the folks in this country can turn a blind eye because it's not their kids. It's never been their kids, and they've never thought about our kids as their kids, or even a part of their country, right? So the way that we're set up is we're so segregated that when a shooting happens in any city, USA, it's not my neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's not my kid. I'm not connected to that, right? As long as it doesn't happen out here, I'm okay, right? Also, when we go into cities, right, think about, I can talk about Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Baton Rouge and New Orleans. When shootings start happening in business districts, then folks have a different conversation.
That's right.
And it's not about the kids that we're losing or the people who have been shot. It's about it's affecting my business, right? So the solutions that they put in place are so much different than the ones you would hear us talk about. They're looking for more police. They're looking for curfews. They're looking for ways to keep Black kids out because they just don't want it on their doorstep.
Yep.
Right? So at the end of the day, this country still hasn't dealt with the racism and the institutional racism that is here. And they don't love our kids the way we love our kids. They never will, in my opinion, love our kids the way that we love our kids. And they can see this as a non-issue. Right?
So reconcile this for me. In a city like Atlanta that has Black leadership, what's happening in cities that have Black leaders that is still leading to them pushing pro-policing conversations as opposed to community interruption conversations, if it is true that this is personal and race-centered, then are we expecting too much or too little from Black leadership?
Don't think we're expecting too little. We should keep expecting what we're expecting, but I also think they are making a political calculation. Can I get back into office if I don't use a pro-police stance? There's mayors across the country who we know care deeply about this work, but then election season comes up, it shifts. There's a different conversation. And I also think we gotta also understand, even in Atlanta, where there's a lot of Black folks, white folks are still with the money running things, right? So I can't get into political, I can't keep this seat if I don't at least allow these folks to hear that I understand them, that I'm listening to them, because that's who they believe is gonna vote. That's who believe they're gonna get the money from. And what I used to try to tell, especially Mayor Fisher when I worked for Mayor Fisher, is that your calculation is actually wrong. If you actually move in the direction that we're talking about, more folks will come out and vote for you who you think wouldn't vote for you. But I don't think they believe that our communities are going to do the right thing. But they know these folks are going to backroll their campaigns.
Yep.
Right? So it's about re-election. It's about power.
Yep.
And I don't want to give that up. So therefore, I got to talk about what more policing look like. And I'll give you a little investment to community, because I think I'm just trying, because I just want to make sure that you believe that I'm here for you, but my real bad is over here, because this is who's going to vote for.
Yep.
So it's all about power. It's all about who's getting reelected. It's all about the next run. And I think that's the struggle that we have, that we can't get elected leadership in a place that says, this is not about my next election. This is actually about doing the right thing and about making sure that I can create as much impact as I can to change these systems.
Yeah.
And they just get caught up in it.
Yeah. JQ, you've worked in these systems, right? Like you have worked across cities, you have talked to other cities, and would your work be easier or the same if there was the political courage to support what it is that you're doing? Like, what role does political courage play? Next question so let me ask you, what are we losing by not having political courage? What is the actual net loss of there not being, or there being the political calculation that people are making? What's the consequence of that for a municipality?
We're losing so many young, brilliant, beautiful Black men. I'm at Grady, where we have a hospital-based violence intervention program, where we're supporting youth and young adults 14 to 34. We had 583 consults in 1 year, and that wasn't the full year. And that's not even the full census of like everybody who's coming in with a firearm injury. There's not enough hands. We have we have a really robust and beautiful team, but there's just not enough work that we can do as a health institution, as a hospital, that can support those 580 something odd people that have been injured. They're disproportionately Black, they're disproportionately men, and while we're there to do the hand holding and to walk them through the therapeutic process, what's being missed is about 2/3 of them are experiencing social determinants. So there's housing insecurity, there's food insecurity, there's transportation issues, they can't find jobs, they need money. They really need inclusive economies and support for them. And so all of them have the capacity to fall through the gaps if we don't keep our hands on them. And that's a whole lot of people for one little program. So then there's that part, right? We're missing that there's these lives that are attached to it. And then we don't have the organizations that have the capacity to support the work that we're trying to do. And so the political courage that needs to be in place to move the dial on this, really requires us to have folks who love and care about our community. And unfortunately, it's not there. I think that where I have found the will is in community, in those groups, those people who you called earlier. It is them who are not even funded to respond to the things that we're doing at the hospital that are showing up for us. You got a kid that needs to get into a program, send them to me, I got them. And I'm well, how are you gonna do this and you're not even funded to do this, you know? But they're we're gonna be your safety net, you know? So they're the ones that's holding us up. And holding us up and holding us down so that we can make sure that those patients and people that we're seeing that we're trying to prevent from falling through the cracks so that they're not coming back to the hospital re-injured is actually community. It's community that's helping us to keep them together. But I can only imagine what the courage and will to do the right thing would look like. We would be out here truly saving lives. And not anecdotally, you know, but truly seeing the benefit of what it means to invest in Black-led organizations, to invest in community, to invest in Black men. So we're losing right now.
Akilah, what prompts you to do violence reduction work when it seems like if you lose someone you love, particularly your son? I think about that and I'm I think I would be doing violent work. What do you feel we're moving fast enough in honor of the folks that we're losing? And if not, what's preventing us from moving fast? Because it seems how many more meetings are we gonna have and marches and talks? How does that make you feel as someone who clearly probably has a sense of urgency around this? And are you feeling that is changing? Are you feeling a sense of urgency that is coming from the different cities that you're in, the leadership that you're in, or are they giving you lip service? Where are we at?
Yeah, I would say it's a both and, right? I think that we're in an exciting and important moment. Big ups to the Biden administration for, I've been doing this work for 30 years. And, during the Biden administration, I got an opportunity to sit in the Rose Garden and we was all there together. And Mayor Baraka was sitting on this side, who is, a good friend of mine I've known for almost 30 years now, as activists and organizers in the field. And so when the president, said that, law enforcement is not the only solution to safety, we just kind of stopped and looked at each other I was you heard that shit? I'm we was man, 30 years, man, that we waited for a sitting president to acknowledge that community violence intervention or community-based public safety is needed. That essentially you can't have public safety without the public. You know what I'm saying? I'm we're not your snitches. We're constituencies in this conversation. And I'm and we need to be paid. These are our tax dollars. Government ain't got no money. you know, right? And so I feel like, you know, we all work with a sense of urgency, you know, and I think that the Biden administration caught on to that, you know, from us, you know, because we put a lot of pressure, you know, on them. And
what do you think made them catch on? I mean, it's an election year, right?
Yeah.
Is it a political sense of urgency, or do you believe that there's actual buy-in to the solution?
I believe that there's buy-in to the solution. Now, here's, like, because we did this at the onset of their administration. Yeah. And they sat down and met with us. They didn't pay no lip service, you know, to us. The people that they hired in the administration, from the Attorney General, like, I mean, on down, like, were people who believe in this work. They're not doing it because the administration is making them do it.
That's right.
They believe in it. The bureaucrats, you know, who've been 30 years at LJJDP, at OVC, at OVW, like, these folks was like, thank you guys for your advocacy.
Yeah.
And getting these people to a place where they want to implement the ideas that we've had for 20, 30 years in the department.
Yeah.
And so we help to kind of like revolutionize things, right? Yeah. Safer Communities Act, you know, $250 million specifically for community violence intervention. Now, we don't have enough of our community partners applying for the money. So, you know, our bread is going to governments and to police departments, family. We gotta apply for this bread because it's ours. So I think that there's real traction happening in government.
Yeah.
I even believe that there's traction happening with law enforcement because it's a survival thing for them. You know what I'm saying? In terms of supporting community violence intervention as a strategy, because they're gonna keep on killing people. And the court of public opinion is against them. And so they realize that, you know, already, I'm like, we're already getting to a place where we're talking about data, right? And data informed and driven strategies. If we look at the data around policing, you know, whether it's non-fatals or homicides, I'm like, we're talking about single digits, family. These folks are not performing with hundreds of millions and billions, 300 billion last year, invested into the existing public safety like kind of infrastructure. And so I think that but where things are moving slow, because, you know, change moves at the speed of trust, is on the ground in neighborhoods, right? Because, you know, we still know Pookie and them, you know what I'm saying, and Sabrina and them. We still know them, and we still think that like we see Chi, and we be like, yo, we know that she's transformed and that she's doing great work, but then also, you know, we still got that disease in us, that jealousy and envy thing where we don't want to see us get ahead. And so there's a thing that happens in the neighborhood where we know who is doing an intervention and mediation to stop violence in the neighborhood, but we haven't fully bought in yet, you know? And so, but it's happening.
Okay, so you feel optimistic about it.
It's happening. Yeah. And once it happened, and you know, with black folks, you know, we make everything to shit. You know, like, hey, once community violence intervention becomes like, you know, the flavor amongst the folks in the field, oh my God, it's gonna be over. You ain't gonna have to say defund the police or none of that, because the black community is gonna be the safest community on the planet. You know what I'm saying? And you won't have to say defund the police, because by the virtue that we make it safe, you know, through community violence intervention, shifting our tax dollars into our hands, we changed the whole game.
Yeah. I'm gonna come right back to you in just 2 seconds. Speaking of Pookie and them, so I would love to, for you, like you are on the ground. I know that for a fact, right? Like you are in the streets in Atlanta. What, Akila just said that, you know, our progress is going to move at the speed of trust. Do you believe that people trust these institutions that are now responsible for the change that we're expecting? Like what are people saying on the ground? Do they trust, are they as optimistic as maybe Akila is?
I feel like they believe in the credible messages that they're encountering. As far as the systems and government and all of that, they have been failed for so long. So you're talking about people that are out there and in these neighborhoods, and you have like things like gentrification and all this stuff going on in these neighborhoods, and these things are supposed to be put in place and these systems in place to protect these people, but you're talking about systems that are irretrievably broken. They've never helped these people. So the trust that they have is with the credible messages and the people that they see out there with them every day that they feel understand their plight. The trust is with the people like, okay, I see your cheese, or I see, for example, your dip that came from this neighborhood. Oh, I know who used to be out here on this corner that has a 9 to 5, or has made a change. I've seen that change. See, that is visible to me. So I can believe in that. The belief has been in the people, not per se the systems that are set up. So we as leaders and people that get to go into these beautiful rooms and have these meetings and sit down with your mayors, and I've been to the White House and all that, excuse my language, all that shit is cool, right? They don't get that. They don't get that opportunity. So the trust is in the people. The trust is in community. And see, it's something like how you say, with a move at a speed of light, it's slow but steady.
Yeah.
It's been slow but steady, but it's not in the institutions that people feel are supposed to be in place to take care of us, because they never have been.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, Fatima, ground us. You are grounded in information. You see these systems kind of operate amongst one another. Paint for me a picture, like when I'm talking to my friends across the country, and they're saying like, I hear conflicting reports. Violence is up, violence is down, violence is sideways, violence, this is violent, but that's not violent. Like, it's like, at a certain point, you can Google whatever you need to and find the information you need to have. Or you could be like, violence is hot right now. Like, there's like but where are we on, are we rightful to, or are political leaders right that violence is up? Or are they wrong that violence is down? Where are we? What's the data telling us?
Yeah. That's a good question. Here's my PowerPoint. No. So I'm going to kind of build off of what Akila Anthony Chi has been saying about JQ about this. We were ready to exploit a particular moment that I think the Biden administration, and Biden in particular, had been hearing these things for a while. The advocacy had been there for decades, right? But then a moment happened in 2020. What happened, right? The pandemic, right? COVID was crazy, and violence spiked in a way that no one was really expecting, or we didn't know what to expect, but it spiked significantly, right?
Why did it spike?
So, okay. Talk about this. So we know the root causes, and someone's talking about the root causes of violence, poverty, economic disinvestment, right? All of the structural racism, right? A lack of seeing justice in any structure or system around us. But that's not true for every single person, right? Because every single person is not violent in communities that are experiencing similar levels of oppression. But those who have witnessed violence, who have experienced a significant amount of trauma, and who use violence to resolve disputes, that is going to create those risk factors layered on top of each other can produce this. It's in a network. It's very concentrated in our communities, and it feeds itself. So it's like, it's just like COVID, right? COVID would spread, you get exposed and it spread. You've, I'm sure, heard that framing. I don't love this framing of violence as a disease, but there's a contagion to it, right? It's a language of distress, right? It's like we're calling for help. It's a cry for help, but the form it's taking, with a gun armed, looks a particular way in our community. Looks differently. Look, older white men over the age of 50, suicide is, right, a leading cause. It's a very, very high in that demographic. So it's not just us, right, but I'm naming the way this harm shows up for us. So the spike, COVID took away so much of the infrastructure, whatever frail infrastructure we had, right? COVID is like, you got to stay home, right? All the services shut down. And so, and I'll come back to the services shutting down, because that was a huge piece for CDI in particular. That was interesting to see. And so even the little bit that we were getting, or the infrastructure we already had access to, was taken away. And so, and also guns. I think I can't remember the statistic, but guns just surged. Like the number of guns that just kind of went to the population during COVID was also astronomical, and not just the legal market, the illegal market. So there's a lot of factors in those spikes going across the country. That happened in 2020, and then George Floyd was murdered.
Yeah.
Right. And my partner is from Minnesota. It was 1.5 miles from where George Floyd died. He died on my birthday. I remember because I saw it on the local news. I remember posting it, and of course had no. I mean, it was just another unarmed black man who had died. Ahmaud Arbery died. I mean, we had so many examples every year of that, right? So, but what ensued from that politically was a pressure. It hit a fervent point. And I think that CVI solved the problem politically for folks. So there's that context that allowed us to say CVI, right? Because people were pushing, they were like, we need something different. This is not working. And everyone could see it plain as day. So that political environment. But then what's the science behind it? What does this mean, right? The question. So violence spiked 30 to 40% in cities. And then we get Biden comes into office at the election happens in November, comes into office, and we're transition team talking to him, right, early 2021, we're like, invest in this. This is it. And billions of dollars get unlocked for this work, which is a lot all at once, right? But what it created was a context where if cities were able to take that by the horns. You had cities saying, we're gonna commit millions of dollars, who had nothing prior,
right,
committing a lot of money and seeing significant reductions. It's incredible what that infrastructure provides. So, going to your question, what happened a year into, 2020, so the numbers that are coming out around last year's violence. Violence has gone down in many cities, about 30 cities that had huge spikes in violence have gone down systematically by 10%. Something we've never seen. And in cities that had deep investment, Baltimore, Detroit, cities that had never seen historic lows in violence, were powerful examples of what's possible when you do that kind of investment.
I'm gonna pause for one quick second and say,
thank you, Anthony.
I saw him texting the Lyft driver, like, I don't see you. Where are you? I'm on the other side. So we appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I'm gonna bring it home. So so violence went down. So we had some historic lows in certain cities that had been scaffolding their CVI investment. You had cities like Newark, and I'm pointing to one of the architects of an incredible violence reduction strategy had double-digit reductions for many years. During COVID, Newark did not spike because their workers were allowed to continue working. A lot of cities, they had to stop CVI work, but they were mandated. We didn't have hazard pay. We were fighting for this for CVI workers to continue operating. They shut a lot of that down. So even when there was infrastructure, so you had examples like Newark where we didn't actually see the spikes. You had a lot of spiking in cities. So it's come down 10%. That's really impressive, right? Double-digit declines, still higher than COVID, right? So we still have to resolve that. There's still a gap. It's still higher than COVID. But in the cities that had very deep investment, historic lows, 60, 60-year lows. Yeah. So it's a complicated story. It's a complicated thing. What then is the headline, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, law enforcement every year doesn't have to prove itself to get hundreds of billions of dollars. That's the problem. This is a strategy that is complementary and allows us to see rapid change in communities because it's being owned by the community.
That's right.
Full stop. And what we're providing as organizations and as communities, thinking about how to reinforce the science and the narrative on top of it. Meaning, there's real data that backs this up, right? There's the stories of what we talk about in terms of what we're witnessing in terms of the transformation, but then there's like legit, if you continue to support those who are at very high risk, we know where they are, we transform their lives, we have enough staff, right, to hit those 500 who are getting shot. We have enough folks like the Dips and the Cheese of the world out there doing the work. We can stop, we can end it.
So we're seeing, what you're saying is like these investments, we're seeing a correlation between direct investment in CBI work and actual outcomes of violence reduction.
We can see it, we can continue to drive it. Now, that takes that, again, police don't have to do that. So when violence goes up, they get more money. Violence goes up, they'll take away CBI dollars, and then you don't get to see the long-term layering impact of having a new paradigm for how public safety works. Right. That's the problem. It's not just we care about short-term violence, but it's the layering of a new paradigm, a new model for doing public safety. That's what we're working on.
So I want to ask you, Akila, like for you, I have this debate often with some folks who have a little bit more of a public platform, and one of the things when I talk about violence reduction, obviously we have to talk about guns, right? Like we got to talk about the role that guns play. But I will say there are a lot of men in my life who say, like, we cannot turn this into a gun-related conversation. In fact, Black men particularly need to be able to have guns on them, have guns around them, because if you take the goal is actually to take it away from us. And that wasn't just like some sort of anecdotal narrative. I would argue that that's a narrative that potentially shaped a gubernatorial election in Georgia, right? And so you have there is a constant debate inside a community about the role that guns may play, and that debate is happening inside of barbershops and inside of the streets. Like, what is the role of guns? What are you seeing that conversation be, given that you are bringing together? You just said shooters, right? I imagine you having a conversation with shooters is not necessarily about gun control. Right. What is the role of the conversation? What is the role of the conversation around guns in the conversation about violence prevention? Well, and how do you have it?
So there's actually not a conversation that's even happening yet.
Okay.
In CBI around the roles that gun-play. But now, just recently, I was invited to Florida to spend some time with the Black Gun Owners Association. Went out to the range with them, shot guns with them, because they have a big interest. Because, check this out, the Safer Communities Act was about $1 billion fund. About $250 million went to community violence intervention, but the other $650 million went to law enforcement. And it had some really strict laws and areas around guns. And so here was a whole group of Black people, Black and brown folks who are going to the range, who are survivors of violence, right? Who were like saying that they were against the Safer Communities Act because it took some of their power away, right? And we had dinner together and had a deep conversation and debate, right, around the roles of guns in the movement. And I'll tell you this, here's my perspective and opinion, on it, right? I'm like, listen, the number one cause of Black, male death between 14 and 25 is guns. You know what I'm saying? And I think that it's important that if you're going to have a gun, you know how to use it properly. You know how to store it and lock it away. Because we do live in a country where there's a Second Amendment. And I tell you this, the number one preemptive cause for homicides in our neighborhood, in most cases, is self-defense. And I tell you, I own guns, because I still live in a war zone, in the places where I live in. Now, is that something that I promote to everybody? Nah, you know what I'm saying? But I think that there's something called responsible gun ownership, And so I'm not trying to disarm the hood, And when I talk to the constituents, the folks in the field, folks are like, yeah, we want to learn how to better shoot. We want to learn how to better store and protect, because we do live in a country where Black folks experience tyranny against the state family. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like this, listen, this is, my opinion, that I think that we need to really ignite that conversation about guns in CBI. I think that folks should be able to allow guns. They should be able to, They got to learn how to shoot right, not shooting like this and stuff. You know what I'm saying? On TV, right? But I think that everybody has a right.
Thank you very much.
Everybody has a right to self-defense. You know, and I'm like, yes, there's a lot of laws and stuff, you know, out there, open carry, this, that, and the third. I think that needs to be really debated. I think that we need to have like kind of a real conversation and dialogue around it. And I'm like, yo, it's about responsible gun ownership.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna have my guns.
Yeah, got it. So, you know, Chief Fatima is giving us the landscape that, you know, it's up, it's down, like, I mean, but there's actual context that we have to have around it, around the country, that we're seeing a correlation. If people have invested in actual CBI work, you're seeing results of that. Give us some Atlanta context, okay? You actually straddle two really interesting lines. You got one foot in the streets, you got another foot in the hospital system, right? And I remember one of the first times I met you, one of the things you said to me was like, we were talking about a statistic that was published in the AJC, which was about the fact that like violence is down at historic numbers, right? And there was a celebration and a public press release about how amazing Atlanta has, like how far Atlanta has come. Mm-hmm. And you came in frustrated that day because you were like, that's not what we're seeing in the hospital. Yeah. That data is not necessarily telling the full picture. Can you help us understand how is it possible that there is one set of data that shows that violence is down and yet you're not seeing that in real life? Is it that you're not seeing the full picture, or is the data not telling the full truth?
The data doesn't tell the full truth. Because like you said, it was a big headline. Oh, all of the crime is down, violence is down. Inside of the hospital, as she stated, and these are just the consults that our team received, it's over 500 and they're a lot, close to 600 consults for people coming in. Everybody not calling the police. They're not calling the police. We've seen that. We have so many people that come in that are dropped off by people in cars, walk-ups, every time we see that walk-up. So that data cannot be correct because you're only going off of the things that people are being calling the police for, that the ambulance is coming out for. You're not able to calculate or compute the people that are just being dropped off. So you're not going to ever be able to get the accurate data of what is really going on. Just like data always talks about too, that this would be a youth thing. It's a lot of programming for youth, and youth is sexy. It's a beautiful headline. But our average patient in the hospital and even on our team, like even out in the streets, the average person that we have that we deal with is like 24 to 28 years old, and it's 24 inside of the hospital. So the data is not correct because people are not just going to the police to solve their problem. Now, I'm not calling the police to say, hey, I got shot, come pick me up.
Yeah.
Fair enough. JQ, so tell us, you know, what is, you've seen CBI ecosystems in other cities. What is a CBI ecosystem? And then what are the parts of that ecosystem that Atlanta has, and what are the parts we don't have?
You know, I'm really excited, Rohit, about like the ecosystem that's building. We're, you know, I want to say like a couple of years in, and there are a lot of people who, again, come with the political will, the heart to kind of do this work. And so we convene our ecosystem quarterly through our Circle of Safety meetings. And it's a lot of organizations who are coming to the table, diverse stakeholders, different sectors. And I would say like, right now, like we're baselining everyone with just information about what community violence intervention work actually is, what it looks like. We're talking about the national work that's happening. We're learning, like, so we're using this as an opportunity to learn. But I think that like, if I had to identify, well, like when thinking about an ecosystem, you know, hospital, of course, is like a part of it, but also what's a part of it is violence interrupters, outreach, street outreach. It is your inclusive economy organizations, is your people who are working on healing-centered engagement. There's people who are doing bolstering family support. It's folks who are doing the work to reshape the criminal justice system. So it's a lot of different players. It's not just like law enforcement or just like one thing. It's all these different players that can have their hand in supporting and redirecting a community around violence, right? And there's lots of gaps. There's lots of service gaps. I think that because it's new and because we're talking about what it means to support people who've been violently injured, it's requiring us to think differently about what that support looks like and to kind of build on addressing those gaps with that population in mind.
So tell me what some of those gaps are. What are the gaps that Atlanta has in its violence ecosystem?
I would say, like, I mean, right now, our work is building. There's a few. I think there's two like primary organizations that are like well funded to do actual interruption work, but like we have like there's 4 or 5 that could be also doing interruption work. So we need more violence intervention work to kind of happen on the ground. And that work needs to be in the hands of Black-led organizations. And like currently, like there's one white-led organization that's been getting like the most funding and doing the most work. And then there's one Black-led organization that has a little funding, right? So like now we need those organizations to be infused with cash so that these Black-led organizations are the ones that's animating what intervention looks like in the different communities that they exist in. Another gap that I would say is we don't have collaborative models for funding, right? Like, so the funding isn't there on the local level. Most of the funding that's coming in is coming in from national. Like we're benefiting greatly in the city from the work that was done with Fatima and the Black and Brown Peace Collective and the work that they have been doing with the Biden-Harris administration. But unfortunately, like local funding isn't there. So that's a gap. Annie Casey, like, I just want to give them a quick shout out. I feel like Annie Casey, like years ago, began the work of trying to pioneer this work and has been like the only local funding that has been making investments. So funding gaps, the other gaps I would say, like certainly like we have had to get really creative about how do we support people around housing. Housing is an issue in the city of Atlanta just in general. But housing becomes a real issue when you're thinking about like safety relocations for people. And like folks are not quick to provide housing to someone who may have just recently been injured because they're considering what retaliation might look like if that person moves in. So there's a huge issue around housing. And I think just in general, like the empathy that we have for people who have been hurt is really absent. Yeah. Like the way that we characterize them, the way that we talk about like folks who are essentially victims. Like that, you know, like we talk about victim blaming with like DV and people who are survivors of sexual assault, but like we don't think about victims of gun violence in the same way, and we don't hold that. So like the first year of our intervention at Grady has been us essentially bumping up against systems because people don't see the people that we care for in the same vein that they would see someone who's a survivor of DV, right? And so there is absolutely no empathy. And then, you know, what we may offer, like Chi just mentioned that the people who we're caring for is a older demographic, right? So they've aged out of services. We're talking about a 24-year-old who has a family. And like, what does it mean to support that young man and his entire family? Yeah. Like, he has kids, he's thinking about like, he has to earn, he has to make money. And so like, what would it look like for us to consider like offering some sort of, I don't know, guaranteed income, some sort of like building an inclusive economy for people who've been victimized. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the creativity is in the room. Yeah. And I think that like for so long, people like gangsters to growers, and Hope Hustlers, like people who've been at it. I think that like at one point that folks didn't feel like they were being seen. So like our Black-led organizations were kind of like being pushed aside and not supported, but coming with the creativity, coming with the ingenuity to kind of like lead in the spaces, but not being invested in. So I feel like that's another piece and then a real gap. And so we're trying to figure it out, you know, and we are doing
There's not
it.
that many gaps.
It's not that many gaps, and I think that like, but there's gaps. Those gaps are real. Yeah, those gaps are real. And I think that like the main gap is like really just like that people need the funding to scale what they're doing. Because there's some really great organizations that are in our, a part of our circle of safety. And I think like us getting organized around that work is the thing that needs to also happen.
We have about 10 minutes left, so want to get a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up to y'all. If you can write your questions down on the cards, I'll make sure that to ask some of those questions. But you know, Chi, like in the spirit of humanization, let's can you actually walk folks through who, like for some folks this is real life and they're just like, yeah, I see this all the time. Absolutely, I've been saying this. But for a lot of people who are trying to enter this conversation, particularly funders and investors, this is purely anecdotal for them. They hear about it, they're like, oh my gosh, what a sad story. I'm so sorry for your loss. But like, can you walk folks through the actual, something happens in the neighborhood, right? Something goes down. What happens between that happening to you seeing them in the hospital and them leaving? What's the journey of a young person or a 28-year-old, the average person who is, something happens, they come to you before they get out? What are the things that you think people miss a part of that journey, as a part of that journey?
I think it's important when you're speaking about gun violence, just when you're talking about the social determinants of health. So when we see people inside of the hospital, it's bigger than us just meeting them at the bedside, which we utilize as a golden opportunity to really assess their needs and do a needs assessment. So when people come in, you automatically, you know they're injured, but case in point, I just used Bob. Bob came in recently. I had an interaction with someone named Bob. Bob was injured. Bob works a job. So now he's in the hospital. He's in the hospital for a while. He has a family that he has to support. But he just started this job, so he doesn't, his insurance hasn't kicked in. He doesn't have insurance. But also now he's going to be in the hospital for a while, so he loses his job. He still has a family and everything at home to support. So
is Bob actually like willing to talk to the doctors when he comes in? Like, is there a, like, it sounds like Bob may not be receptive to coming to the hospital in the first place, right? Is that like, how does Bob get to the hospital, and is Bob coming willingly? Can we rename Bob as well? There's no way you're hanging out with Bob.
I just gave him Bob. So you want to name Bob Hakeem? We can
name Bob.
I'm gonna name Bob Hakeem.
I just made a suggestion to make this a more comfortable conversation.
Got it. So Bob is shot. Hakeem is shot. Hakeem comes into the hospital. No, he's not coming there willingly. He didn't just say, I'm coming to the hospital.
Okay.
So Hakeem is shot. He's injured. And Hakeem just started a job. Hakeem literally just was going out, didn't have anything to do with anything, but he's been shot and he's in the hospital now. So there's the frustration behind him being shot. He doesn't really want to talk to doctors. He sees people that he doesn't feel like is going to understand the situation. So you have myself, or people that are like myself, that come in from my team, that has a level of empathy, and from a shared lived experience where we're able to communicate, and now they're able to let us know all of the things that happened. One, just trying to explain, I didn't do anything. And so now some of the services and stuff that they have, because there are resources, but guess what? He doesn't fit the criteria because he doesn't want to talk to the police. A lot of our people, black and brown young men out here, do not have trust in the police system. So now you have victims after services. You don't qualify, so now you can't get that help. And now you're in the hospital, so you've lost your job. And you just got into this job and you don't have insurance. So now I have to worry about, outside of the fact that I'm injured, I'm in here, I have a family that I need to support. I don't feel like anyone cares outside of you. Now we have to help this person, one, heal. The hospital is going to make sure that your body heals. But then you have to look at from a holistic standpoint, what about the spiritual and mental healing that needs to take place? So how are you able to do that when you're not able to address the real needs that you have and you have to worry about bills? How can I heal? And I'm like, okay, I don't have a job now. How can I heal? And I have a family at home that I need to support. So I'm supposed to just go back out into the community and be okay? And this happens a lot of times with a lot of the people that we see that comes in. Like, no, okay, so I don't want to go against the systems that you have put in place because we're already distrustful of these systems. A lot of Black people are distrustful of the hospital system. They're distrustful of the police and all these things they say are supposed to protect them. And so now because of that, I can't get services. So now we have to stand in the gap to make sure people are okay and have these connections and be able to make sure people are okay going back out into the community. Have systems and community-based partners that we can work with to say, hey, I have someone that can help you find somewhere to stay when you get out of here. And housing is one of the biggest problems because now that you have been injured, let's say Hakeem stays in an apartment complex and he was injured, and now they're like, you're a safety risk, or say if you got injured over here where you live, we don't want to have anything to do with that, or now we're going to make it an issue with you breaking your lease. How many people have legal representation to help them with that?
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I hope Bob is okay too, because I forgot about it in that conversation. But I think what you're laying out, right, is like these are folks who they're not willing to have that honest conversation with just anybody.
Yes.
Like the fact that you are there and they know that like you understand their journey, they're willing to even give you more honest data, and so only then can we have more honest solutions and interventions. Yeah. My last two questions, and then again, we'll open it up for the audience. Write down your questions. If you want to put your cards up in the air, one of our team members will collect it for you, just so I can make sure I get all of y'all's questions. Let's talk about caps. I will tell you, JQ has been talking about caps for so long, and it wasn't until like 2 weeks ago that I actually knew what caps was. But I was nodding along. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for caps to come either. I can't wait. She's like, wait till caps gets here, though. And I was like, absolutely. And I Googled it. No cap, yes cap. I know. So it has taken me some time to fully admit that I didn't understand how big of a deal this is. I understood it because I trust anything that comes out of this woman's mouth. But number two, I didn't realize how much of a collaborative effort it is to take this like very targeted approach to reducing violence in cities. Akila, can you as one of the partners in CAPS, just kind of let our audience know, hey, what is it, right? Like, what is it really, like behind the scenes? What's going on?
Yes.
And then what does that mean for Atlanta? And then I've got a follow-up for you, Fatima, and then we'll open it up.
Sure. So CAPS, the Coalition to Advance Public Safety, is a...
Oh, it's an acronym.
Yes.
No, I knew that.
It's a collaboration between 4 national TTA providers, the Collective, the Health Alliance for Violence Intervention, the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform, and Cities United, working collectively in 12 cities over the next 5 years with the goal of reducing near-term violence by 20% in the first year of cohort city, or with the first cohort, 15% with the second cohort, and 10% with the third cohort. So our first cohort were the first 4 cities is Newark, Baltimore, Indianapolis, and Baton Rouge. Today we just launched our second cohort of cities, Atlanta, Los Angeles. Yes. Oakland and Milwaukee. And so essentially what each one of our respective organizations are doing is playing towards our strengths in the public safety, in the CVI ecosystem, right? Jaquel laid it out earlier that community violence intervention is like the core, of CVI. And then you have HFIP, you have trauma recovery centers, you have, workforce development. You have all of the different systems and everything that work together collaboratively with the goal of reducing violence. So our goal is to come to your city, not to replace or, supplant. We're not here to establish CAPS as an organization in Atlanta, but here to strengthen and enhance the existing infrastructure that is already in place. And so, so just the couple other things, the features, right? NICJR, the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform, will be doing like a cost of violence analysis, pulling together all of the data to show basically how your tax dollars are going to pay for all of these systems of violence, right? To give you the data and put it in your hands, and also the elected's hand for them to make better informed decisions around how to invest in community violence intervention, right? Fatima will talk about Javi, but Javi is going to be supporting Jaquel and the team at Grady, strengthening and enhancing the existing HBIP program. Extremely important in this whole ecosystem, right? The collective will be working with a lot of the CBI organizations, helping you we'll do a strength-based assessment of your agency. We'll help you to develop a TTA plan, a training and technical assistance plan, and then it's a living document, and then support you in terms of scaling, your respective organization, and keeping you connected to the ecosystem, right? Cities United, will be working with, the mayor's office, with your electeds, helping them to better understand what CBI is, why there's a real need for investment in this respective work. And not to say that folks don't already know this, So again, it's all about, enhancing and strengthening existing infrastructure. And then, we'll work with you all collectively to coordinate the strategy, to help identify new resources. We also will be re-granting dollars. So I think the collective will be the lead in Atlanta in terms of working with your leadership. You guys will identify like all your CBI partners and HBIP partners in the ecosystem. And it'll come to the core four. We'll sit down and determine like kind of the scale of money. I think we're moving about $500,000 in each one of the cities. So your organization can get anywhere from 25 to 50 to 100 or 200 grand, in order to support your work. The grants are specifically to help you to enhance and strengthen your agency. And with that,
just a very micro, very quick. You've done one round
yes.
Of this. What do you think you need to do differently this time around that maybe was a lesson from the first round of cities?
I would say that collaboration and coordination is hard enough. It is extremely challenging and difficult, right? And so when we launched this initiative, it was coming right out of the White House initiative. We received a substantial investment from Ballmer Group and Schusterman to support the organizations, but it was only to build the capacity of our respective organizations. I mean, we are flying the plane, family, as we are, building it as we're flying it, And so I think that in retrospect, some of the infrastructure stuff that we're putting in place now in terms of partnering with AIR to do our data, partnering with Evergreen to help us with comms, partnering with, hiring a managing director to help us to better manage, not only the support and work for you, but also the deliverables that we have to do as a coalition to funders. I think that, we are constantly learning a lot, through this overall process. It's been transformative.
Yes.
I want to just lift up, Chris, Arroyo back here, who is, my trusty number 2 in terms of CAPS, that runs everything CAPS, and Berta, who manages all of our data. So a digital media manager for the collective as well.
Amazing. So last question, and then we're going to ask some from the audience and close out. But Fatima, this next question has slides. Because we knew you were a nerd. You didn't have to tell me. it's great. You're brilliant. And so we want to lean into that a little bit and then grab that as much as we can. So we have a quiz. No, but I wanted to, one thing that y'all did that I think is really special about CAPS is this analysis of what cities actually need in order to be able to move the needle on this work. And you did I'm just going to show these slides real quick and then have you contextualize what it actually means, because it sounds really good and I've used these slides before, and then people are like, all right, cool, well we got like $4 to give you, so there it is. And I'm like, great, well we're close, we're close. But what your study showed is that Atlanta would need about $32 million to be able to invest. Now, I will say that's about what,
A year.
That's right.
Annually.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, and just to contextualize that for Atlanta, $32 million sounds like a lot, but actually we spend $247 million on policing every year. And so I think that just to contextualize that a little bit, like it's a little over 10% of that, if diverted, could be interesting or raised against it. So just to put that into context. So about 32 million, so what does that mean? This is a really pretty chart that shows that there is wraparound support, there's actual expertise, there's staffing, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. And we'll share this with the group that has come to this event later. But ultimately, it led into this, which I'm sure you have memorized, so you don't even look at this. Is that you recommended, like, we need street outreach workers, we need mediators, we need case managers, we need CBI supervisors, family case managers, victim advocates, we need violence intervention specialists and actual staff to run an office, right? So this is a real infrastructure, right? Can you contextualize this for us? Is this it's about a fourth of the cost of a police training facility, but the other piece is also, just as context, that's all, but like, where will this money, how do cities generate the courage to dedicate this money? And is this bare minimum? Is this maximum? Where are we?
Oh man, thank you for this question.
Yes.
And thank you for acknowledging all the nerd work that went into this. The team knows that I'll lock us in a room for days.
Okay.
So because there's a lot of collective brilliance, as Anthony has stepped out, David Muhammad, who wasn't able to be here from NICJR, Keela, and myself and our staff. I mean, collectively have 100 years of experience, like sitting and thinking about these issues. And this was an exercise in articulating something we know, but it's powerful to write it down, right? It's powerful to write it down. So what was the exercise? Okay, so what's the science behind CBI, right? We talk about healing and transformation, the trauma that we see in our communities. But it's a handful, so it's a fraction of a percent of people in our neighborhoods who are actually shooters, who are actually going to pick up a gun and use it to resolve disputes. And we can estimate that number based on our population. We can take that number and then say, okay, well, how many chiefs do you need? Because chief can't go to at all 500, right? Like how many are in their caseload? What are the different functions of the seat? And then how much does it cost? I know it sounds super simple, but really breaking it down at that level had not been done before. Yeah. Not at this scale. We took the 50 cities with the highest rates of violence. We looked at the population, we looked at the homicide rate. We can't get the non-fatal shooting rate. She brilliantly said that, like, we are undercounting how much violence is happening in our community. Yeah. And Atlanta in particular, CDC said this to me, in Atlanta in particular, 80% of the violence that you all see in community is not reported to the police. 80%. That is like really unusual. I mean, really I know what unusual. I'm talking about. Atlanta's an outlier in that. So just exactly what you said. So these projections, these are estimates. It's the bare minimum, right? It's just getting us started. We had internally a real tension because it's powerful to write this down, but then you see those numbers, you go, gulp, right? Because they're not actually huge numbers when you compare them to the police, right? And the justice system stuff, or criminal legal system stuff, right? Not the justice we are talking about, but what we didn't want to do was write down a number that was so big it'd be like hopelessness, like, okay, well, then we're not even going to try to start a CVI ecosystem because there's no way we're going to get to those numbers. We have one staff person for the whole city. How on earth are we going to get to that, right? On the one hand, but on the other hand, if we don't have a stretch, we can't even envision this as the primary system, right, where our people can be safe and whole and healthy and transformed. That's the tension. Yeah. So it's really funny the reactions we get from different cities, right? And we were trying to strike a balance. So we've got cities that have really pushed and advocated for a long time and have the infrastructure. So I'll give an example. We've got like LA. LA is very difficult because LA's got a lot of dough, right? There's a city, there's a county, you know, but to try to project those numbers, I mean, honestly, you know, those early estimates, we were like 100 million, you know, we would need that much. That's a big number. But in Chicago is working, their advocates right now are working to raise $400 million. And they asked us, they were like, wait a minute, you underestimated for us. We need more. I think we projected for them, you know, close to $100 million, like I think $80 million. They're like, nope, we want 4 times that. And I was like, actually, that's right. It's really hard to balance. What we were trying to do is say at least a threshold, what we can do for the minimum. That doesn't mean that the work, if we don't get there, that we're not doing excellent work. Yeah. Most cities do it for far less. That's true, but it doesn't honor how this work can continue and be sustained. It values people's time. We want to make sure you have benefits and training and hazard pay and retirement savings and Netflix and right. You know,
especially Netflix.
Listen,
absolutely.
You know, this is like when this is well resourced, you know, and you
like
don't
health.
have it takes that, and we're trying to really put numbers there that truly honor this work, and we're not relying on unicorn, brilliant people. This can be something where it can be professionalized, right? Yeah, that's right. To raise my hand and say, like, yes, I aspire to be, right, a violence prevention professional who can do this for my career and become a supervisor, because those are actual positions. You know, so that was the exercise. So we had 50 on the site, cviecosystem.org, and we're working on the next 50, and we're working to refine the model, because there were things that we couldn't fold into this one, like, okay, so this is a caseload for 1 year, but our folks don't just like, you know, 1 year and then they're done, right? You need multiple years, and you know, you need, so there are other ways to make it more complex, but it's very exciting. We also, CAPS has an actual website now. You can Google us. That was also launched today. So yeah, you can find us on capsinitiative.org. That talks more about our organizations and this coordination work.
Amazing. Kyle, I'm going to ask you at a certain point what the surplus of the budget was last year, so we can get a sense of what it might be this year and whether this is a request we should make to our city. So if you could help me get that information. So I'm going to read some questions from the audience. Oh, these look like novels. Nice. Okay, great. Can't wait. All right. So the first question is, there was someone who warned Congress that 30 million jobs will be lost in the next 10 years due to technology. Do you feel that will cause a huge spike in poverty-driven violence? Should we actively work toward creating policy around this potential threat? So this is about the changes in technology creating poverty-driven violence. Akila, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I would say that CBI is it's a workforce development solution because it's a new career path. And so I think it's a solution, you know, to these tech jobs like kind of coming, because I mean, man, CBI, you can't, you know, there's no tech or no innovation that you can do on top of people. I always tell folks that, like, you know, if you ain't hiring Pookie, Raheem, and Sabrina and them, then you're probably not doing CBI, you know, because I'm like, hey, this work is about relationships. It's about people. And so we pay people to leverage their relationship capital in neighborhoods to mediate and prevent, conflicts from turning into crisis, right? And so, I would say that what we're doing is a solution to that problem.
Okay, thank you. This next question is about, there's been a ton of money, and I'll ask this to you, JQ. There's been a ton of money that has been poured into CVI organizations during this administration. So at least a lot more than there has been in the past. That puts an immense pressure on these organizations that are getting money to scale at a speed that just might be too fast. Then when the quality of their work is impacted, the government thinks that, well, clearly they can't handle it, or that they should just kind of create something else for the government. How do folks protect their organizations against that pressure to scale too fast, instead of just strengthening the quality of what they are already providing?
I bet you this was a safety and justice fellow that asked this question.
It wasn't, actually. It was not.
Well,
They should have asked it.
Because I think that that's one of the things that we really try to encourage our S&J fellows to be really intentional and thoughtful about, like how fast they're scaling and to focus on less. I would say that there's been an infusion of some cash in CVI organizations, but not a whole lot. Right, not enough. You just saw, Fatima explained that 32 million is actually needed to kind of do this. And I think that we have to resist the urge to go fast because it's going to prevent us from going far. It has taken us years to get in this place where we are trying to address this issue of violence holistically and to kind of, be at the urgency of government or the urgency of a funder to kind of rush to create responses. I feel like that's the wrong answer.
Yep.
We have to be intentional. We have to be thoughtful.
What do you tell an organization that's this is the first time our organization is getting this much money? I feel like I gotta go, but really I need to build. What's the way to go about the conversation?
I think this is the challenge with all of us. We're all I'm building a plane and flying it at the same time. And so part of what we have to do is gut check ourselves as, Ivy, and say how do we want to cause further harm by trying to go fast?
Yeah.
Or do we want to be intentional and build this in a way that's going to really be supportive for folks? And I think that it requires organizations and people to be really honest with themselves about that, and to also be honest with funders, to be honest with administrations, legislators that are funding you about that one thing that you can move fast on this, but we will get this wrong and crash and burn quickly. So I would say I would caution people to understand you are the experts. Policymakers don't understand and know what you're doing, because if they could do it, they would be doing it, right? So I would really caution people to just kind of help folks understand that this really requires thoughtfulness. We cannot speed past, and speed past go and not give some real thoughtfulness to how we are moving. Otherwise, we're gonna crash.
Yeah, but this is one of the few sectors that doesn't actually give grace for.
There is absolutely no grace. There is no grace. And I think I said this earlier. I'm thrilled that there isn't a whole lot of evaluation that's tied to what we're doing at Ivy, because we do get the opportunity to kind of have a soft launch and to be thoughtful and to kind of take a step back and look at what we're seeing and reconfigure, and we're being honest about that. And I think that that's the other thing. We have to be transparent and be honest, because I think that sometimes we want to oversell in order to get the funding and to get the dollars, but be real. Keep it a buck. It is hard. It is difficult work. It requires us to think about so many things. It requires us to think about staff wellness and our own wellness, and to not replicate the stereotypes and the harmful things that other systems have done. And we're in that space now. Like, we built an intervention that certainly is like trying to deal with high-risk individuals, but we don't want to just deal with high-risk individuals. We now like, hey, what's clear and what's glaring in this first year of Ivy is that the system stuff is just as real. Right. And so like, we have to deal with the system stuff while simultaneously helping them. And there is no rule book, there's no guidebook. Like, it requires us to take a step back.
Yep, thank you.
And focus on less.
Yep. This person didn't write on a card, they ripped out a piece of paper from somewhere. Fatima, I'll ask this to you. Do we need better data collection, or if violent crime is underreported, does it allow for more freedom/autonomy to work with people who actually will come to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to first break down or make sure we are on the same page with what we say by data collection. What so pains me, what JQ is saying, which I know is true, but it just pains me, is that research and evaluation is associated with those very colonized, harming systems and structures that happen on top of community and not in partnership or driven by. Yeah. And if that's the way we think about data, and then Pookie, Raheem, Sabrina and them are not seeing themselves as the researchers, as the innovators, as the ones collecting the data that we actually need to do the work. Yeah. And that pains me, because that is not what it's designed to do, right? We have eyes, ears, we can see, we understand, right? We are processing information that is valuable. Yeah. And how do we take that wisdom and translate it into innovation? Well, we do it, Black people do that all the time. Black and brown people do this all the time. And it is our right to have spaces for us to do that. Yeah. That's what research and evaluation is supposed to be. So what you described was, we're not going to use that antiquated, very colonized way of thinking about evaluation. We're going to do our own and have some protected space for us to analyze and think about our own data in new ways. That I want for everybody. Yeah. I want everybody to have that, to have spaces. And so when we talk about coordination is hard, part of what's hard is like giving ourselves that space to sit together and say, what do we see? Yeah. What are we seeing right now about how violence is showing up in our communities, right? And the insights that come from that. So what do we need to change in order to make sure we are doing right by our people and showing up? Yeah. So that's what we are talking about. So do I think there should be more data collection? Absolutely, right? But from our people in this way. Yeah. And then how we document it, oh my gosh, we dream about all these ways that we can, can we get more audio recording of people just, because not everybody, people who are brilliant in this work may not have the skills to write, a case note in the way that, these systems are taught us to write, but the observations are powerful. Right. How do we get that data down? How can we use technology to do some of that part, in AI and natural language processing, whatever. Those are like the fancy terms. At the end of the day, it's about how do we bring that knowledge to us, for us. And so yes, we want to see more of that. We want to think about formats that make sense for us.
So last public question, and then a final closing question. Akila, I want to turn to you. This question says, how do we hold perpetrators of violence accountable for their actions while knowing jails and prisons often cause more trauma and harm, but also keep the victim's needs and safety in mind?
Absolutely, yeah. I, just in telling my story, that the perpetrator who murdered my son, I don't condone what he did, but I also recognize that this perpetrator might have been a victim as well, because every perpetrator is a victim. It's a vicious cycle, honestly. And I'm sure that this kid has been failed by every system that's out there, right? And so in some cases, I think that jail is an important kind of short-term stabilization process for people, because sometimes you might not have the infrastructure at home, or in the community. So we're talking about the ecosystem that has to be developed to be able to really hold people and support them properly, so we can pour in them. And so sometimes, jail can act as that vehicle, you know, especially when you're doing this CBI work, because there's a direct correlation between what happens in the street and what happens in the pen, you know, like people call shots in the pen that knock people's head off in the street and vice versa, you know, and so when you have a comprehensive strategy that includes people that are inside, because they ain't dead, I mean, these people are alive and thriving and sometimes have more power, you know, on the streets than they have inside the institution, right? I think that it becomes extremely important about just the continuum, you know, of services in your strategy. And so I think that that there are systems of restorative justice. There are all types of complementary and alternative systems that we can use to be able to address violence in neighborhoods, right? That are not just the criminal legal approach. And real quick, you know, my son's case has been a cold case for 20 years. You know, but y'all know how to. I come from the. I'm gonna be from Grape Street for the rest of my life. You know, and so there's a conditioned response to what happens in the neighborhood. You know, my son's friends, my partners that I grew up with, they was like, the big homie don't deserve this, and so people are going on a mission, and I had to literally go and stop folks, you know, from harming, you know, the kid, because it wasn't going to bring Terrell back, right? However, you know, even though I gave the police department, the sheriffs, the name, address, and telephone number of the kid, because, you know, the streets talk. 2 weeks later, they called me and was like, yo, y'all can go and pop them directly. You know, these are cats from his neighborhood, you know, because of the work that we've been committed to for so long. And folks found out it was my son that was murdered. They was like, yo, name, address, telephone number of the kid, y'all can go and knock his head off, green light, you know? And I had to stop my brother and them from doing that, you know? And I gave all of the information to law enforcement, to the police department, because I was like, I can't risk any more of my people, you know what I'm saying, by going to harm this kid. And I tell you, you know, nothing was done, nothing. And the part of it is because I got on America's Most Wanted, you know, as a celebrated activist in LA, and said that, asked this kid to turn himself in, you know, because I'm like, I know these cats out here in the street, I know it's relentless. And I'm like, yo, so that you can get help. I'm sure, you know, that this kid is watching my every move. You know what I'm saying? And looking for the opportunity, you know, to come forward and atone for what he did. Sure of it, you know? And so how do we institutionalize systems that way, right? Because there's no statute on murder, you know? And so we've attempted to work with systems. Look, because I think that every situation requires a deeper analysis and understanding of the dynamics, you know? Because I tell you, like, it wouldn't serve me to have this kid locked up in prison for the rest of his life. You know, because guess what? My tax dollars then is going to pay for him being in jail for the rest of his life, you know? Like, we already know that the death penalty don't work. Like, it's like you give a person a death penalty, they die on death row. You know what I'm saying? After we spend $100 million, like keeping them in jail, you know? So I'm like, there's a better way of being able to resolve some of these issues. And I think that, you know, they're emerging. And this is why we need more investment, you know, in complementary and alternative strategies, because, you know, our current criminal legal system does not work. It's like, if it did work, I mean, then, you know, then this kid should be in jail, right? Like, I'm like, but again, you know, I think that there are opportunities, you know, for us to be able to host different type of conversations and dialogues that are way more powerful, you know, than, oh, let's lock this person up and throw away the key, you know, because it's an initiation. These folks have a lot to give back to, and I want to be able to hold the kid accountable. I'm like, it's not, you know, you don't get to get away with that. You know what I'm saying? Now you got to give back, you know, to that what you're taking from. That's right.
Kyle, do you have a number for me? 6 million. Huh?
Surplus?
6 billion? Million. So $6 million surplus for last year. From 2023. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that this year we are entering budget season again. last year with surplus dollars. A number of dollars were allocated in the last minute to a number of initiatives that may have been prioritized by either a council member or an administrator. That budget season is actually, we argue, one of the most important times to get involved in these types of conversations, because if we're talking about changing budgets, this is the time in which they can do it. They are not, especially out of the general fund that Atlanta has, and we have fact sheets for y'all that you can take a look at. Like, please be involved in the budget conversation, because if you want to see dollars move, that this is the appropriate time to do it. They have to come up with their budget by July 1, so June 30th. So we got to make sure that those decisions are made now. Draft dropped today. It's hot off the press. It's gonna rap battle Drake. I can't wait. Like, it's great. All right. Last question to y'all to close us out is that this is happening in Atlanta. CAPS is coming. We got some feels on who's gonna embrace it, who's not gonna embrace it. But we need CAPS to win. Like, this has to win at the end of the day. But it is in this moment, it is entering a very imperfect ecosystem that is going to require not just narrative shift, which is one of the questions that's asked here, but we need narrative shift. That's a part of the formula, but we're also going to need some power shift as well. So what do you think is the ingredient for success that CAPS needs to center or keep in mind as it enters Atlanta this upcoming year? I will start with you, Chi, and we can make our way down.
Okay. Just making sure that the work and the funding and stuff that goes for the people that are out here doing it goes to the people that really are doing it. The Black and Brown organizations. I feel like to help Black and Brown, you have to be a Black and Brown led organization to be impactful with these communities. That's the biggest thing for me, providing that TA education and an upliftment for these people so that they feel the best to be able to and have the best ability to go out and be impactful in the community.
Caleb, what do you think is going to be very important about Atlanta for
I think that what's going to be very important is coordination, amongst partners, providing the TTA support, to help organizations scale and to move these dollars.
Yeah.
And to leverage those dollars to bring in more monies for our partners.
That's right. Yeah.
All of what these two said, so just not to repeat, I'll add to, I think that as we put the investment in, the coordination in, and we start to see these wins, that we can tell that story over and over again. That narrative shift, it's a big concept, but it means we got to lift up the work constantly, and we want to see it in the news. We want to see the sizzle reels of organizations and doing that work, so people have a visual of what this is. It's still very conceptual, and so I think that's going to be really critical to keep telling that story, and to not create enemies, that really let people know that there's a space for everybody to contribute, and lanes for people to operate in, but that we can do this in it together.
Yeah. JQ, bring us home.
I just want to see orgs get money, and I know that's
Yay. That's what I'm talking about.
I do. I want to see them get money, but I also think that what's going to be really important is for us to understand that slow and steady wins the race. Yeah. I think that the urgency of addressing gun violence is a real thing, but I do think that we can do this with some thoughtfulness. I'm super thrilled to have the support and the technical assistance that's going to come through CAPS. But I think that it's going to be also extremely important for us to understand that slow and steady, we're building this thing, and for us to collaborate and to understand that you have to break down the silos and working individually. And I think that we've been doing a really good job of that. I'm really proud of what we've built over the past few years. Yeah. But I think that it's going to be on us to take this on too. And it's going to be really great to have you all holding our hands, but do know that you know, you have folks who are ready, who are waiting for this. But like, yeah, slow and steady would be my advice, like, because we don't want to crash and burn.
Yeah, that's right. Chi, Akila, Fatima, JQ, y'all, thank you so much for this conversation. We're grateful for your leadership, and particularly today as we're continuing to even see violence in Atlanta in a variety of different ways, and people fighting for like basic civil and human both discourse and just survival. Y'all are leading away and giving us narrative and language and anecdotes and data to be able to maybe just fight in a different way. And so I think Atlanta is grateful for y'all's leadership. For the rest of y'all, this is just the beginning of the journey. This both for CAPS, but also like the Center for Civic Innovation has this cohort, a new cohort that just started, that is going through their process. And I see some folks who have touched that. Kirsten, I see you. I see a few advisors that have been in the room. People who have touched every single step of how we build leaders that are ready for this fight. What we train and teach these leaders is that they are entering a fight, and this is a game, and we're going to win both of those things. And so for us to win, we've got to wrap our arms around these folks and make sure that they succeed. We have feedback forms on the chairs. We would love your feedback on this event. If you were like, wow, like I really loved his interjections and jokes, feel free to put that. If you didn't, please don't write that down. But in all seriousness, any feedback that you have or any other types of discussions you'd like to see, we'd love to have that. Y'all can hang out for a little bit. We're going to start cleaning up a bit. Our staff's got we got class tomorrow morning. Dominique, I hope you heard that. We've got class in here tomorrow morning, so we're going to be setting up for that. But thank you for an incredible evening. We appreciate it.
I'm excited about you all being here.